What it do, comic babies? I'm Bunkmaster B, and this has been a hard week. Over the weekend, my buddy, who I hope a lot of you also know, Curtis Fisher, aka Skipntosh, passed away. And Skip was a friend of mine. Skip was a lot of things. He loved music, was involved with it all the time. He loved people, was always seeing the best of people. He was a man of great faith, but I wouldn't say most importantly, but one of the biggest things about Skip, and if you knew him, you probably knew, he was a lover of comics. I got to know Skip through BJ Kicks, Comics Are Dope, but Skip was everywhere. I mean, he always had things that he was working on. He was on Comics Are Dope. He had his own channel, Skipntosh. He was on Thinking Critical. I think he did some stuff with Nerdette's Newsstand. I mean, just the man was always working on a new project, oftentimes many at the same time, whether it be musical or comics or things like that. It's been a tough weekend. Had a lot of good discussions with a lot of the people who loved him. And I wanted to talk today about some of the comic series that when I think of my friend Curtis, I think of, and the comics that meant something to us together for whatever reason. So this video isn't going to be about the comics themselves. You'll get a little B-roll that's going on in that corner whenever editing Bunk gets to it. But it's the stories behind them, and what they meant to sort of us together and how they helped bring us together. Kind of like my 5 comics challenge video. I think one of the most beautiful things about comics is how they can help bring us together, what the stories themselves mean to us, as opposed to just the stories themselves. So, if you knew Skip, even if you didn't, I'd ask, pour yourself a glass, Cabernet, and let's talk about one of my comic friends who was taken from us too early. So if you knew Skip, you knew this list had to have a Jonathan Hickman book. And that was, for me, this is absolutely going to be Black Monday Murders. And not just Black Monday Murders, but this Black Monday Murders #1 first printing. So, Skip and I had been friendly. We'd been talking online for a while. I mean, honestly, at this point, years. And we both big Hickman fans, and specifically this one right here. This is my favorite Hickman story. I don't necessarily know that it was Skip's, but I know that it was one of his favorites. And I happened to pick up at a back issue sale at one point a whole bunch of the later back issues, and I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna see if I can collect the early ones. I read this series digitally, and I managed to grab a Black Monday Murders #1 4th printing. And you know, I was showing that off on Hall's picture, and he saw that and he's like, "Hey, saw you got that 4th picture. Totally cool to say no, but would you be interested in trading it for a first print? I've got 2 first prints. I don't have any #4." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" you're coming out the worst in that deal. And he's like, no, seriously, you'd be doing me a favor. Because the print run for number 4 was so low, I didn't even know it existed. So I've got 2 of number 1s. I'd love that. And we set up a comic trade, and it was the first comic trade I'd ever done. And of course, we threw each other some extra things in there. You can actually go on his channel and see him opening the one that I sent to him. And just he was so happy to spread that comic joy. And in my mind, he was trading a book that you can find at a quarter bin for a semi-rare number 1, but for him it was just helping a friend and helping himself along the way. You can see right there he got this one from World's Best in his beloved Sacktown. So one of the last messages that I was able to talk when we were texting was about how Phil Coker, Tom Coker, not Phil Coker, the artist on Black Monday Murders, how he had just posted some new pages, and he said he'd been working on it, and Skip hadn't seen that, but got to share that with him. So that was cool. And then the next book, kind of along those same lines. The next book we have here, one of Skip's absolute favorite books, and that is The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. This was his book of the year last year, and this was a book he adored. A lot of people adored this book last year, but the reason that this one is here, the reason this one is so special for me, is Skip helped me track down all of these foil variants that you see right there. So this series had all of its cover A's, like any series, and then they had the foil variants for every issue where they would cycle in a different artist. I didn't know about all of them. The only one I knew about was the David Mack issue 1, and he knew I was looking for that one. He's like, I think I can probably get that one for you, because again, I read this when the trade came out, and then I decided I was going to go back through and pick up the individual issues, and by that point they were pretty hard to find out by me, but he was like, I think I've got it. And for him, he was just happy to have this project to go and find these comics, because again, the hunt was fun for him, but on top of that, he was just the kind of guy that wanted to help make people happy. It made him happy to help me with my collection. And he picked, I think I found like the foil for number 4 on my own, and I think he got me the rest of them, but I chose for this one specifically number 3. This is the cover by Danny. We both absolutely loved her artwork, and she'll be coming up here in a little bit again, but this one right here, I can't tell you how much we talked about her artwork, and specifically the way she drew eyes. I mean, just so emblematic of a Danny picture right there. So, Laila Starr, always gonna think of my buddy. Next one we got here, I'm using Murder Falcon as the stand-in, but really, it's just Daniel Warren Johnson in general. And even broader than that is just sort of any type of great distinctive artist. I mean, Skip was a guy who had his artist that he would follow to the end of the earth, and Daniel Warren Johnson was a guy that we both absolutely loved. And without spoilers for anything, this book hits a lot harder home recently, but the real reason that I have this on there was the last thing that I got to send to Skip was actually some Magic cards that featured the artwork of Daniel Warren Johnson. So I got to send him a package about a month or so ago, and I had just found out that Daniel Warren Johnson had drawn art for some Magic cards when he posted on his Twitter a new one that he had just done. And so I tracked these down, and they were super cheap. They're not great cards. And so I grabbed some for me. These are obviously the ones I have. And then I sent with some other books. I sent those to him because I knew that was going to be some Daniel Warren Johnson artwork that he didn't have before. And he was excited in order to get that. And then after those came, I picked up these from the new set that just came out a little while ago. And you'll notice that there's 2 each here. If I can figure out how to... There we go. Those are... There. You'll notice that there's 2 each of these. And that's because, once again, one of them was going to be for me. And one was going to be for him. But I'll just hold on to him for you, buddy. So we go from talking about Daniel Warren Johnson art, but also just, his great love of art and elevating, especially artists who had a really distinctive style. Nothing against, your sort of your classic comic artists who were, very sort of classically comic style. But Skip was a guy who loved sort of those auteur artists who had a very distinctive style that you can kind of look at and just immediately at a glance know who it was. And because of that, Skip was a guy, whenever I was looking to pick up a new original art piece, he's a guy that I would always message him beforehand, let him know what I was thinking about, and always get his opinion on some things there. And when I look back through my original art portfolio, there's a few ones that stick out. So when I bought my Sean Phillips from Criminal, if I can figure out how to... anyone who knows Skip knows what a big Brubaker and Phillips fan. He coined the term Foo Baker for him. What a big fan he was of that team. And so when I was buying a page from Criminal, we went back and forth and talked about different stories, different characters, who we were looking for. He was a big fan of Jacob, the artist. I mean, Skip was always going for the creatives, being one himself, whereas I was more of a Leo guy. We kept going back and forth, but when I decided that this was the one I wanted, he backed me on that, let me know that was a good decision. And there'd be bunch of other ones too, but the other one I want to point out that he really helped me with was this Danny piece right here from Coffin Bound. So Coffin Bound was a book written by Dan Waters, who Skip was a big fan of, and it was drawn by Downey, who was mentioned earlier. And we kept going through and again talking about the characters that we loved and who it was, and ultimately it was again that pair of eyes from Danny that won this page over. And again, I had him to thank for helping me figure out where we were going on that one. And one more piece of art you can actually see behind me. Which brings us to our next story. This is a page from Skip's most beloved series, Ice Cream Man. And that right there is from one of his... That was the first page of Ice Cream Man I ever owned. And it came from one of his favorite series, which is Ice Cream Man number 24, the telethon issue. So this is that page I just showed off right there. But anyone who knows Skip, anyone who knows about his love of comics, you have to know Ice Cream Man. That was the series he was always giving out. Favorite series. And we talked a lot about this one. This is actually one that I had been reading before I knew Skip. And he was just so excited about that, so excited to talk about it. And anytime I do a reread through, and there'd be something I'd pick up, and about just, the little lore building pieces of it, we'd go back and forth talking about our favorite series. I love this series, and this is always going to be a Skip series. I think half the internet who's reading Ice Cream Man has Skip to thank for it. Next up is one of my favorite comic reading experiences I've ever had, and that's Four Kids Walk Into a Bank. So this right here, Skip, myself, and BJ Kicks from Comics Are Dope, we all read this together as a little impromptu book club. Kix has talked a lot about how he wants to get more into indies, but he's a Capes guy at heart. And he happened to pull a random hardcover of this, and he just mentioned that he had that. I'd had this on my shelf forever and hadn't gotten around to it. And Skip never missed a beat to read some awesome books with people. And it was never really planned, but we just kind of all read it together, and we had just this great book club, just kind of talking with each other about it, talking about what we loved about it. Each one of us kind of took a different thing away from it. For Kix, it was one of, really his first indie comics reading. For me, I love my comics on the sort of, talkier side, I call them. So I'm a big 3x3 9-panel grid page, talking heads kind of thing. I'm a big Bendis guy. Skip was never a big fan of that kind of thing. In fact, Bendis was a big point of contention for the two of us. And there's a lot of talking that's going on in this one, but there's a lot of other things too. And they played really interestingly with format and with different things there. And so it was, for each one of us, there was something else that that we were able to pick up and see, and it was this really fun experience where it was, this one book gave a little something to each of us in a different way. And just that book club where with each of us, kind of bringing something else to the table. Like I said, it's absolutely been one of my favorite reading experiences I've had. Now, I said one of my favorite reading experiences, and that's because, bar none, my favorite group comic reading experience is The Human Target. So like I said, I like my comics talkier. I like my 3x3 panel grids, the 3x3 panels, the 9-panel grid pages, very reminiscent of Watchmen. And Tom King is kind of a huge guy that does that. And Skip could not stand Tom King. He was not a Tom King fan at all. But I read this issue, and it was very clearly born of noir sensibilities, which Skip loved. And I thought, I think this might be a Skip book. I sent him a snapshot of a few panels in here. I can't remember exactly which ones it were. I mean, heck, it might have even just been this opening right here, where you get him grabbing he's got a cough, he's grabbing a glass of whiskey, drinks it down, his cough goes away. Just very sort of classic noir and get that going. And just, I think I sent that to him, and I was like, I think you're gonna like this one. I think this one might be up your alley. And he was like, I don't know. And I told him, you know what? I'll tell you, I'll buy you the first one because I want that reading experience to go with you. So I sent him some money on Venmo. Funniest thing about it too, because I'm smart like that. I made a long joke about Tom King, how it's all meta commentary, and I included a mention of the Crimean War in this just silly, stupid throwaway line, and it actually got held up by Venmo security, so then I had to send it again, and it was a whole thing. But Skip was not a fan. Loved the artwork, and I mean, how can you not? It's Greg Smallwood. But he was a lot of the same things that he'd had issues with before were still the case here for him on this one. But to his credit, he read the first one. Wasn't for him. He kept going, and we, up through issue 6, this was one that we would read together and we would discuss. And the reason that this will always be my favorite group reading experience, and I think this kind of just illustrates the kind of person that Skip is, we would have the most fun discussions about that. And I think that word is really important right now, because I think way too often when people disagree on something, it's not a discussion. It ends up being a debate. And not even a particularly good debate where people are exploring their different sides, but it seems like we're not allowed to disagree anymore. And what it comes down to when people are debating is one person just sits there waiting for their turn to say why the other person is wrong, instead of actually listening and trying to learn. And with this, we could not have had more of a different opinion each time. But every time we would read an issue, we would talk about how it affected us, what we thought about it, what we took away from it, and how we got there. And I have never been more happy to disagree with anyone ever. And this is the only book that's on here twice, because this one right here, Human Target number 5, centered around the Martian Manhunter, who is one of Skip's favorite characters. And he really thought that John Johns was done dirty on this one. And we just talked about our take from it, our reading. Again, never trying to prove the other person wrong, never trying to say why we were right, but just, when I read, I felt this, and going through. And it was so fun to see the other person's take and kind of picking up on things that was there. And I just remember at the end of it, again, because we weren't trying to prove somebody wrong, we just got to express it. And his response was, I wish I could read these books the way that you read them. And that was simply just finding the joy in finding, because he knew how much I love these books, and he wished he loved them like I did. And I think that is just so emblematic of Skip, is he was such a positive guy. He always wanted to find the good. He wanted to pull out from everything. He wasn't there to tear anybody down. He was always there to build people up. Anytime someone was working on something, he was the first one to shout them out. He was everyone's biggest cheerleader. He believed in his people, was loyal to a fault. And that's shown just so through our discussions, especially on Human Target here. I don't care what else happens. I will never, never be more happy to disagree with anybody than I was with this book. And again, going on that point about just how he was perfectly happy to let other people like the things they like. In one of our comic trades that we did, Skip was big on throwing in extras. And he knew both how much I love Tom King and how much Mr. Miracle, this story, means to me. And so when he was looking around for extras to pull for me, he grabbed this copy of Director's Cut #1, which I had never read before. So, just, again, the kind of things that was there. The next book I would be spotlighting, if I could find my copies right now, would be Homesick Pilots, which, I don't know, just popped up somewhere over there. This was a book that we, again, disagreed on. And this was a reading experience I wish I had. So, Homesick Pilots was another Dan Waters book. We both started out reading it. Skip was a huge fan. It was one of his favorite books of last year, 2021. 2022? Maybe it was his favorite. I guess it would have been 2021, whatever year it was. And I loved issue 1, and it really kind of lost me from there. I found it was a little bit too busy. I thought it had too many ideas, too many themes going on. And I liked it when it was sort of a little bit simple, more punk rock in a haunted house. And then when they started adding in the supernatural elements, it lost me a little bit. I talked about how I thought it got a little too busy with the tokusatsu, and me being a big Power Rangers guy, he threw it back, and he was like, listen to this guy, it's not Power Rangers, so it can't be good tokusatsu. And we never really got to go too deep into it. We know we disagreed, and when Skip started to, when his health started to fade a little bit, and he was having some days where he couldn't really work on things, I told him that I was going to give Homesick Pilots a second chance, and I was going to finish the series. And that when he was feeling up to it, we were going to do a video where we talked about it on an actual video. And he was right there for it and said, let's go, I'll be there for it. And of course, that video is never going to come now. I still don't know if I'm going to finish it at this point, just because I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense for me personally if I'm not going to get to discuss it with him at the end. But I also know how much that series meant to him, and I don't know. I might still end up doing it. But with that brings me to my last book. And that right here is Torrent #1 by Mark Guggenheim, and most importantly by Justin Greenwood and Rico Renzi, two dear friends of his in real life. And the reason this one means so much to me, and again, I think one of the things that just sort of shows him is I talked before about how Skip was a person that elevated everybody else in his life. You know, he wanted to bring everyone around with him. And when this was coming out, Justin sent Skip an advanced reader of issue #1 and just said, hey, do whatever you want with this. And, you know, most people would see that, you know, they got a cool, you know, special thing, and they would say, well, what do I do with this special thing? You know, I'm going to put this advanced review out. I'm going to have my name going on that. But that's not Skip. Skip saw that and said, how do I elevate somebody with me? And so when he got that, he knew I was a big Justin Greenwood fan. And he reached out to me and said, hey, I got this advanced reader. Do you want to do a tag team review on Torrent #1? I was like, I don't even know what that means. But he had all these plans. We were going to do this tag team review on it, and then we were going to talk to Justin, and it was going to be this whole thing and all these grand things. And I said, sure, of course. I'd love to do something like that. And that was all well and good. And again, just the fact that he would think to elevate me along with him when he had this thing was already well and good on its own. But what really puts this one over the edge for me is one of my last enduring memories of Skip is back in February after my wife and son got COVID and I had to quarantine away from them, and my daughter was at a different place. So basically I was away from them. Right after they finished their period, I got COVID myself and I had to isolate by myself, and basically it was 2 weeks straight that I didn't get to see any of my family, and it was a little rough. Obviously it wasn't as bad as it was for many other people, but still 2 weeks away from your family is no cakewalk, especially when you're stuck alone by yourself. And it was during that time that we were planning on doing this, and under the guise of we're just going to go ahead and just do some pre-planning for this tag team review, we ended up having a 3-hour-long conversation. And I think of that conversation, we maybe went over the review stuff for like 15 minutes. All the rest of it was just life and stories and just hearing everything. And I mean, there was laughter, there was joy, there was so much there, and so much of what I will think of Skip and what I will just take on with me came from that conversation. So Torrent was a time that he was trying to uplift his friends, but more than he did that with the review, he uplifted me personally when I needed it. Thanks, buddy. Now this video has gone on long enough. I've already got a stack over here. If I was doing every video that I had any kind of connection with him, I mean, just everything here. I mean, half of my shelf, there's some kind of story, there's some way that we talked about it. But those are the ones that I really think about when I think about him. And like I said, I know I'm not alone in this. I mean, anyone who knew Skip, he was such a warm, inviting, uplifting, positive person that everybody's got their Skip stories. Everybody's got their Skip connection. And I want to know yours. I think at this time, this is when we should be celebrating those Skip stories. We should be talking about the good times and everything that we had with that. And I want to hear yours. I'd love to see your own video where you're talking about what Skip meant to you, what comic stories you associate with him, anything like that. If you put one of those up, please tag me on it. I want to see that. Otherwise, put it down in the comments. I know in multiple different places, especially over on the Dope Fiends Discord, we've all been sharing our stories and our remembrances, but I want to hear more about it. I want to celebrate the man, my friend, the person who brought everybody together. I want to hear more about that from you. So with that, I've been Bunkmaster B. You all have been amazing. Stay awesome. Catch you next time.